Hello, I'm Colin Green, and you are listening to Spike Pit.
You know, I think it's really important not to forget the G in RPG. And I've been very fortunate to play in our mutual friends playtest of Reaver. Of course, I'm talking about Joe Salvador. And in that game, of course, we are discussing rules and things because it's a playtest. And I've really enjoyed that game. And I've really enjoyed those discussions and those fine-tuning of the mechanisms and, you know, seeing what mechanisms work and give the right feel and which ones don't. And I've really had a good time with that. And that may not be a traditional role-play experience, but it's been a very satisfying experience. So, I think there's room, and that's the great thing about role-playing games, is there's room in the hobby for all these different things, whether it's free Kriegspiel, super light games or, you know, like Lasers and Feelings or something like that, where it's a super light game where there's hardly any rules at all, or at least as far as the player knows, there's hardly any rules at all, or these super duper complex games with all these fiddly modifiers. There's room all the way back and forth for whatever the group prefers. And as long as the group's happy, then you're doing it the right way.
Mr. Connolly there draws a rather nice parallel that I hadn't considered when I recorded the episode, and that is this business of playtesting. I've always enjoyed my playtests of games. I've done a few. I've helped my brother out. I was involved with Old School Essentials with Gavin Norman on various different bits and bobs. And then, as mentioned by Jason, the Raven God himself, Joe Salvador's Reaver. I only played a couple of sessions in that, to be fair, but thoroughly enjoyed the whole process and the sort of to and fro that you get between sessions on Discord, all thoroughly enjoyable. I think it's because I'm a designer at heart. That's what I've trained to do. Coming from art and design and furniture design, it's still that problem-solving mindset, and I like new ideas and taking a fresh spin on things. And of course, you get all that with game design just as much as you do when creating or designing anything. So, yeah, a nice parallel there. And thank you very much, Mr. Connolly, for your call, as always. Now, I can't contain myself any longer. Before I get to my other callers, I've got a bit of news for you. This is a segment I recorded last Thursday. So without any further ado, I'll cue it up and play it for you right now. Right, so I'm jumping on the mic because I feel it's a bit of a landmark moment. Yes, indeed, folks. It's D&D Club news, and the D&D Club at school is up and running. First session today, we had 12 plus enthusiastic players eager to find out what it was all about. In fact, it almost kicked off on Tuesday, but I was doing a duty, and a bunch of eager students come running up to me. Mr. Green, you're needed in the library. We need to know how to play D&D. Can you come and help us? But unfortunately, I couldn't make it. I was man in the canteen, and we arranged for me to pop up today, Thursday, and wow, what a great time we had. Everybody bubbling over with enthusiasm. We established that there was 3 of the kids had aspirations to become DMs. I explained that it's, you know, likely that we'll need to split into some breakout groups and get some additional DMs set up. But oh man, the enthusiasm, the energy, you can't beat it. But I tell you what, you take it for granted when you've been playing for so long how kind of familiar you've become with it all, and dealing with total noobs. I mean, I get this all the time in my job, but dealing with total noobs on a subject, the character sheet, everything about the game seems to be quite a mystery for these guys. A couple of them came with a little bit of prior knowledge, but by and large, you've got the dice, the character sheet, the attributes, the language, so much stuff for them to learn. But what amazes me, they don't seem at all fazed or intimidated by any of this. They almost revel in the detail and finding out this whole new world. So I was conscious of not droning on for too long and boring anybody. We had a volunteer DM in place, and they're starting with the original 5e starter set. Now, if this was totally my plan, this was all taken out of my hands. A big shout out to the librarian who kind of drummed up a bit more enthusiasm, kind of actually pulled the group together. And I had said, this needs to be something that they're all invested in and they kind of run themselves. It's got to be a self-sustaining thing. I don't mind helping out on in an advisory capacity, but I really want to see some new players, some new DMs, and some groups that can go and sort out their own stuff and not rely on the teacher in the room, as it were. So yeah, they were stoked. They were using the pre-gens. I explained how very little stuff you actually need, how you can't be wrong about things. It's all about having fun, sharing in the story, and you're only limited by your imagination. We played in the lunch hour, so it's quite limiting what you can actually get done, but it was good. They made up names. They talked about how they knew each other, and I kind of gave them explained to them the concept of trying to think about your character and how you're going to portray that. And you initially you're going to be looking at your sheet, but don't be afraid to go beyond the sheet and make stuff up. And I was explaining this idea that until you talk about something to do with your character, that doesn't exist. You are creating the fiction. You're bringing the fiction to life, and you're doing it as a group. I think the tendency is they maybe have had experience of computer games or board games, and they're super structured. There's not this freedom, and of course that's the beauty of the RPG. So I'm gonna really enjoy seeing how they develop and how this unfolds and what sort of ideas the kids come up with. And I tell you now, this is a mixed bunch. Academic ability, culture, gender. We've got all colours and all creeds, and it's a massive melting. It's going to be a crazy melting pot of ideas. Really, really exciting stuff. And rest assured, Old Spike Pit will keep you posted.
Hey Colin, it's Che, just calling from Roleplay Rescue. Just want to thank you for your episode, State of Play, and you were talking a little bit about how you'd had a good chunk of the session sort of absorbed in a rules-based discussion, basically. You're playing ICRPG, get your situation around swimming and how to survive in water with armour and all that kind of stuff, and how you'd, as a group, collaborated on solving that. In the nature of ICRPG as a rules-like game, you have to come up with rules for your table. And I thought that was fab. And you mentioned in there, there's two thoughts I had really. You mentioned in there, first of all, this idea that, this would damage your immersion. Well, I don't know, it depends on the immersion you're talking about. So switching from otherworld immersion or character immersion to rules immersion, for me, is just absolutely fine. If you're immersed in that kind of stuff, that's really, really cool. And if everyone's at the table is enjoying that process, and of course collaborating with the players is going to deepen their sense of ownership over the game and their sense of creativity towards the game. And as you mentioned, also will help you to figure out what is the reality in this game world. So the rules essentially give us a sort of a baseline of the sense of reality. How do we consistently resolve things tells us something about the world. So I think that's great. It actually adds to the world, to be honest, if anything. But also it reminded me of something really important, and that is I'm a GM of GURPS, as you know, and that's a pretty detailed set of rules. But what I'm learning to do increasingly, and you reminded me of really, is this idea that when I come to a situation in play, rather than reaching for the rule book, I think the first question to ask myself is, do I kind of know the rule? And if I don't, then I might ask the table, does anybody know the rule? Actually, if not, then it's actually probably better to not grab the rules, but actually to say, okay, well, given the principles of the game system that we're using, given the kind of like structures that already exist, how best can we go about resolving this right now? And then, of course, making a note to yourself, if you want to go check it out in the rule books later. But actually, to me, the solution we come up with at the table with our games is just fine. And if we're all happy with that, then that becomes the new rule. It sort of overrides the written rule because these are our games. And as you rightly said, a big element of role-playing game is game. And I think as GM, we often enjoy the mechanical, stuff around the rules. But I think players often do too. Now, of course, all the caveats, there are going to be people who, I've heard many of these over the years, who would say, like, no, it's a complete waste of our game time. I don't want to do that. Actually, you should know the rules, GM. And all of that is perhaps true, but I wonder sometimes whether the assumptions we have about what people think are entirely true. And I think that there are many players who enjoy the game aspect and would, in fact, welcome a discussion around some of these things and being part of the solution. So just thanks for that. It got me thinking. It got me to recognise once again how rules system and world support one another, and how essentially it's very important for me at the table perhaps to switch to the creative mode rather than this, as you mentioned, frustrating search for something you know is in there somewhere in the rule book. Game on, brother.
It's been a while, but it's always a treat to hear from Jay Webster, one of his well-considered and thoughtful ponderings, a reflection on my last episode. And I entirely agree. This support between system and setting, the immersion that is got from engaging with the game, even if it's at a rules level, it doesn't need to be the setting. It's buy-in, player buy-in is what you're trying to get. Be that them turning up every session, creating interesting characters and thinking about reflecting upon those characters between sessions, maybe pouring through the books and finding new spells and equipment that they kind of suggest that they want to find. There's all different ways that players engage with a game, and I think we need to be open to that and keep our eye open, be vigilant as the person running the game, because it's like a little sprout of green or a little seedling popping up through the soil. You want to encourage it, nurture it, and that's where your solid gaming group's going to come from. Sometimes I feel that I know we say it's no point running a game if the DM's not interested, but I feel sometimes you've got to go halfway and meet the players, and that's a little bit of a problem I'm having at the moment, and that's going to lead into my next segment where I'm talking about some of the struggle that I'm encountering once again with ICRPG. It's this runaway wild beast that I'm trying to wrangle into submission, but I don't know who's winning, guys, whether it's me or the beast. Regarding my Monkey Island or Monkey Isle ICRPG game, I feel like I've hit another speed bump in the road. I really like the ICRPG system. I love the DIY vibe. I love the dynamic, flexible, adaptable style of the game. but I can't help wondering if my players are not so enamoured. Now, I can't lay the blame of that at the door of the system. I don't know if I just run it a little bit too fast and loose. I don't know, but I just got that nagging doubt. We have some really good sessions. I feel like we have great fun when we're playing, but I'm wondering if it's that time between sessions that is the issue. Especially, I've got my young son. He likes to do that whole get absorbed in the game type of thing. So between sessions, looking at character options and looking at magic and messing about with stuff like that. And I think often as adults we get at times maybe a bit too busy for that. Seemingly we're not too busy to record podcasts, but you know how it is a kid. You sit there poring over the books and you kind of want the next new shiny, and the likes of Wizards and these other big companies keep this constant supply of stuff coming along to fulfill that demand. I feel like I'm a little bit older and wiser now in terms of where I'm gonna spend my hard-earned cash, and I know when I've got way too much in the way of books and things that I'm not going to ever really utilise and make the most of. So it's quite easy for me with ICRPG just to have the one book, look at the odd supplement or adventure that somebody puts on out there into the gamosphere, pick that up as I need it. I don't feel a great need to go collecting the stuff. And the creator himself, he's a one-man band. He's not putting out thing after thing after thing. As it is, I've got some versions of the game that I haven't run yet. In particular, I would like to give Bearcats, take that out for a spin. Might be something I suggest in school. Then there's the different worlds, the warp shell and the what is it? Fighting ice, snow and ice. I always get that one wrong. The tribal frozen kind of Neanderthal hunter-gatherer type of version of the game, and then Ghost Mountain, of course, as well. I'd like to do the Supers one, but I feel like I'm really bad at running Supers games, just because they're not something I do. I'm not a big Marvel or DC fan, so I'm not up on my superheroes, and I don't know that I've got that much in the tank in terms of creativity to bring to a game like that. I'd probably want to play it a little bit more to generate some ideas and get a feel for it. But yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky one. What do you do when the sessions are fine, but maybe you're just hitting a sort of a 6 or a 7 out of 10 in terms of what everybody thinks of the game overall as a package. I could well be wrong about this. It's perhaps a discussion I need to have, but I don't want to really leave these characters. I don't want to leave this campaign. I'd like to bring it to some sort of a decent resolution, even if that resolution is a temporary one. Then revisit the world in the context of the Iron Kingdoms. I think that's a really good fit for the vibe of the game that we've got and what the characters are interested in playing. But then I don't know whether I'd run it in 5e or something else. And I'm super keen to get some Forbidden Lands played. And we're all DMs, and there's other players in my group that want to run some games, and I'm running alternating weeks with DM Ricky, but there's my brother's got ideas, things he wants to try, probably get some Wolfrup, some Warhammer Fantasy roleplay to the table, and then my son, he watches a couple of characters on the telly. They've got not on the telly, what am I on about? On the YouTubes, and they've got their own RPG system, and he's keen to look into that and perhaps run some of that. And I don't want to discourage him from stepping up to the real serious leagues of DMing. So yeah, it's always the same. So many games, so little time in which to play.
As far as the Harpies, well, I think that's best left to the listeners' imaginations. Don't you?
Yo, Spike Pit, man, it's been a while, but you're asking about how Harpies would reproduce, so I figured I'd have to chime in, man. I guess it would depend on which type of Harpies, which legends you're going with. You know, early Harpies were depicted as beautiful winged women, whereas later on, Harpies turned into these vicious monsters. There's also some ancient Greek stories that talk about how a specific Harpy, I forget her name, gave birth to Achilles' two immortal horses. So if they could give birth to a horse, I'm sure they wouldn't have any problem giving birth to another Harpy. Now, I think the question is, do they lay eggs, or is it live birth? That'd be one big egg if it was a horse in an egg, but then again, that'd be a rough live birth. So it's I guess it all comes down to, are we talking about the more feminine Harpies or the more monstrous Harpies? And then it just comes down to the gods did it or magic did it, really. But, you know, some beautiful woman with wings comes up to me and is like, hey, what's up? I'd be like, hey, what's up, dude? Let's see how this goes. And I'd be down. So how do they reproduce? Easily. Anyway, man. Sorry for bringing down the level of your show. Peace out.
And there you go. You can rely on Joe. I should have seen that one coming. I should have definitely seen that one coming. Bought it on myself, lowering the tone of my show. I don't know what you think you're up to, Richter. But I know what you're saying. And in my campaign, they're definitely monstrous Harpies. I mean, they got to be right. Horrible, stinking, mangy, clawed and vicious Harpies. And they're quite large as well. But interestingly, I just recorded the episode and I heard on the news that a crocodile, I believe it was a crocodile or some kind of reptile like that, had laid fertile eggs and they'd hatched, and there had been no male crocodile whatsoever on the scene, and these eggs had spontaneously been fertilized. And apparently this is a thing, it can happen. And I've never heard of this, I never knew anything about it, and weirdly, I mean, I probably just had my ears open, receptive to this kind of discussion, and yeah, so it's a thing. So I don't have to rely on magic necessarily, and whatever else Joe said, the gods, I don't know. But thanks for that lore drop, Joe. And I think Harpies are a great monster, and they're cropping up again in Forbidden Lands. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about Forbidden Lands now. At this point, though, that is the last of my calls, and I want to thank everybody. We heard from Jason of Nerds RPG Variety Cast, Shay Webster of Roleplay Rescue, and the irrepressible Joe Richter of Hindsightless. Cheers, guys. Couldn't have done it without you. It is a hassle nowadays, I feel, for a lot of folks, and I appreciate the effort you've made. Now, let's get back to the Forbidden Lands. My ongoing game purge continues, It presents me with endless, it seems, tricky decisions to make. But what happens is I get the books out and I have a little flick through, and recently this has happened with Dragon Warriors, also Maelstrom. Stirred up a load of nostalgia, got into them, ended up picking up a couple of extra Dragon Warriors books at no small expense. Could have done without that, but feel like they're decent value. Discovered these kind of slip-on covers to help preserve them a little bit. Clear covers that slip over your paperback books. Needless to say, had a sort of a disappointment with the sizing of those, so ended up kind of having to buy twice as many as I needed, because I kind of the initial ones I bought were a bit too big, and whilst they worked, I weren't happy with them, and I went for some smaller ones and they were perfect. As it turns out, I get to reuse the original, so not too bad. Anyway, I digress. They were my old paperback books, and it was very unlikely that I was going to get rid of them. But I thought, I've got them, be nice to read through them, and it was all part of this art idea, this line art from back in the 80s, and really got swept up with that, making slides. It's an ongoing project, and I've learned quite a bit doing that, processing the images, cleaning up the images, so really worthwhile. And in the sort out, I came across, well, I don't know if I really came across it, but it became the turn of Forbidden Lands. And I picked on Forbidden Lands because there'd been on, I think it was on Kev, the Dungeon Musers Discord, there'd been some chat about the Year Zero engine and Free Legan or Free League, some of their products. And I started thinking, I quite like the look of that Forbidden Lands, and you know how it is, you get this sort of idea in your head and it kind of goes round and round, and I thought, I had a minute for some reason, I'm going to get that stuff out and have a look, and it's so nicely done, lovely books. And back in 2018 when it came out, I bought into it pretty big. I don't know what I was thinking of it, not really like me, but I do have to watch myself. I can be a bit of a completionist, so I'm very careful about what I get involved in, and I've been stung and got my fingers burnt a few times, especially with the likes of Fantasy Flight. I'm looking at you, Imperial Assault. Anyway, Forbidden Lands, I got it out. You got maps, your stickers to go on your map, and absolutely, I just love the size of it. I love the box set. I've got the cards, the dice, all the stuff. And I think my enthusiasm was fired up even more by going to UK Games Expo and seeing the stand for Free League. It's now quite a fair size stand, much bigger than I ever remember it being, and they've got so many nice products out there now. Of course, one that springs to mind is the 5e version of Lord of the Rings that they've picked up the license for. Very nice book. You've got Vassen, you've got Tales from the Loop. I've been so tempted by that in the past, and I've been delving into my digital copy of that, once again spurred on by the artwork. Mutant Year Zero, the list goes on. There's so many. Oh, and of course Twilight 2000, quite a lot of talk about Twilight 2000. My old buddy Carl Rodriguez, he's playing that. We've got Kev, the Dungeon Muser. He's getting all set up for a game of that that I'd love to join, but I just can't get involved. And all this talk of Free League, and in fact Swedish gaming in general. apparently really massive over there, and I can see why. You know, with products like this to choose from. Oh, what's the other one? There's a new one. Dragon something. That looks cool as well. Anyway, that's due out soon, and I think that got me thinking about it again as well. Anyway, Forbidden Lands, been read through the player's book. I'm back reading through the DM's guide. I'm going to look at the whatever it is, something or other, Purge. Can't think what the name of it is. Some really great ideas in there. I don't think I've, other than the pip system, I don't think I've played too many games with a dice pool. Unless you want to count Tunnels and Trolls, which would be fair enough. But this dice pool is different. I must have done, but I can't recall now. Unless you count Cthulhu Dark, kind of a dice pool. So it's got that. It's got this idea of strongholds. It's got a really procedural travel rule set in there, exploration. And the books are written quite differently. They've tried to pile a lot of content in there and tools for the DM. You get all the usual tables, but you get some real interesting lore that's been made accessible and kind of useful, I think, at the table. There is quite a lot of it, maybe a little bit more than I'd like, but some real interesting stuff and some interesting twists to the way they've done kin, which is like what once upon a time we kind of would have called races. We've got kin. I like that idea of kin. I like what they've done with halflings and orcs, and how the orcs were kind of like a former slave nation to the dwarves and the elves, I believe. Elves are a bit different. Dwarves are a bit everything's a bit different. Halflings especially a bit different. I'm not going to go into it too much, but really excited about Forbidden Lands. I could go on, but now I'm rambling, and I'll pick up on Forbidden Lands again another time in the near future.
And that, as they say, is a wrap. Big thanks goes out to you, the listener, for taking a bit of time out of your day to listen to Old Spike Pit. Take care, and I'll catch you later.